Welcome to Motherhood. I'm Dr. Christina Hibbert, and as you know, I am here to help you overcome your challenges, to become the best you can be as a mom, and to flourish in this interesting experience we call motherhood. And I'm so grateful for all of you for tuning in each week here on Motherhood, for choosing to grow through motherhood with us instead of just going through it, because it's a whole lot more fun to grow through it and to do so together here each week on Motherhood. Now, our topic for today is going to be a fun one. I think it's a fun one anyway. We're going to be talking about how to make marriage work. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how to resolve conflict in marriage. And this is all based on my own personal experiences, because the day that this show is airing is my 20th wedding anniversary. And so my guest is going to be a very special someone who's going to come and join me in a few minutes. And I'll introduce my guest in just a few minutes as we talk about strengthening marriage. But first, I want to again thank you for joining us here. And I hope that you've been able to join us on our Facebook group on facebook.com, which is called Growing Through Motherhood. And I know that we've had a lot of new people joining us, and it's starting to become a really fun place to get together, to share ideas and thoughts, to support one another through motherhood, and to really just grow together. And if you're not a part of that group and you want to join us, please visit Facebook and just search for Growing Through Motherhood. And you can ask to be added, and I'll be happy to add you to the group. And you can become part of our community so we can kind of get to know each other a little bit better and support one another. Also, I hope you'll visit my website at drchristinahibbert.com for resources and materials on all the things we talk about each week. Especially today, we're going to be talking about all of these ways that we can improve our marriage and overcome conflict. And there are all kinds of resources on the website there and on the blog that you can check out as well. So when I mention something, just go to drchristinahibbert.com and check it out yourself. And then join us on social media. I love social media because it's a place where we can get to know each other better. So find us on Facebook, on Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, wherever you are, I'm there. And also join us on our YouTube channel, Dr. Christina Hibbert, because most of you might not know that I often publish videos related to each week's episode. So if you would like to watch the episode in person and see what's going on behind the scenes, you can check those out on YouTube as well. And there will be a video for today's show as well. All right, so as I said, we're going to be talking today about strengthening marriage and how to make marriage work. Now, I'm going to share a little bit of research before we get going here, because the reason why I focused on overcoming conflict is because research shows that that's actually the most important part of making a marriage work. Now, when studies look at couples and what makes marriage work and what makes couples strong, the research hasn't been able to really find one specific trait or ability that a couple has that makes them more likely to make it in marriage than another couple. The one thing that really sets them apart, the research has found, is if a couple is able to resolve conflict or not. Because let's face it, anybody out there who's married or is in a significant relationship, and I just want to say, I know there are many people out there listening who might not be married, but are in a significant relationship, or maybe are starting a new relationship or want to have a relationship in the future. And everything we talk about today can help not only in the relationship that you're in a marriage, but also it can help in all your other relationships as well. So I hope you'll stick with us and listen and learn with us today. But when we're in these relationships, it really comes down to how do we resolve conflict? We're going to have problems. It's not like we're just going to, expect that things are going to be all blissful and sunny and perfect, because it's not always going to be that way. We're going to have our hard times. And the thing that matters most is how do we overcome that conflict? And before I introduce my guest, I'm going to tell you who my guest is. It's my husband. My husband, OJ, is my guest today because, as I said, we're celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary. And I thought, how fun would it be to have my husband come on the show with me and talk about strengthening marriage and making marriage work, and to share a little bit of our struggles and our challenges and the things that we've learned over the years as we celebrate 20 years of marriage. And before I introduce him to you, I just want to share a little bit of the research. So one of the things that I found is in a study done by Pap, Cummings, and some other researchers called For Richer, For Poorer, they looked at marriage and they tried to see, what is the most common problem? What is the biggest conflict that couples face? And what they found was that by far, children was the biggest. Having children and dealing with children, that might be dealing with what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, the disagreements that you might have with them, how to discipline or raise the child, or values, or whatever it might be, from all of that to nutrition to how they're growing, anything. But basically, children is the number one thing that couples have conflict over. And if you're a parent out there, which most of you are, if you're listening to Motherhood, you probably understand why that's so, because it's not easy to be a parent and it can be really tricky. And what the research found is that nearly 40% of all the conflicts involved kids in some way. But another interesting fact of this research study showed that kids weren't the only problem. Obviously, there are lots of problems that we might face in a marriage that might make it difficult. But one thing they found was that the conflict that consumes the most time actually wasn't children. The conflict that consumed the most time for couples was dealing with issues around money, finances, spending, and work. And what they found was that led to more depression and angry outbursts. And it was the most recurrent problem that kept coming up over and over again. And it's also associated with our career and work choices and things like that. So just keep that in mind. Those are the two most common according to the research. But I want you to ask yourself, what is the most common issue that you and your spouse or partner face? And hopefully we'll be discussing some of those things today as we share some of the most common conflicts and some of the ways to overcome them, as well as how we can really strengthen our marriage and make marriage work. Okay, so now I get to introduce my fabulous husband. And here he is, OJ Hibbert. So OJ, welcome to Motherhood Radio.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm so excited to be here.
I can tell. I can hear it in your voice.
In our office/studio/guest room.
Okay, so I've talked about this before, that most of you out there probably, you might think it sounds fancy to be on a radio show, but we are literally in our office/guest bedroom with the door locked, with our kids downstairs, and a sign on the door that says, "We are recording a radio show. Do not come in." So it is pretty fancy to be here, is it not?
Yeah, and I want to say you look great for being 29 and having your 20th anniversary.
Wow, thank you, dear.
But I was going to say, as you were introducing us, that we can talk about some of the conflict because we were married when we were 20 and 21 years old.
Yeah.
Not a lot of kids do that these days. So we got to deal with not quite being totally mature yet and going through conflicts, having kids early in conflict, having schools and careers. I think I was a minimum wage dental assistant when we got married.
Yes.
And you couldn't figure out why we couldn't go out to eat every night.
Yeah, I had a hard time with that one.
Yeah. So
yeah, I learned a lot from you, and you hopefully have learned something from me too.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Good. Well, let me tell everybody out there a little bit about my husband, OJ, here. First of all, we met 20 years ago. Well, we met more than 20 years ago. We were married 20 years ago. We met 23 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, 92.
In the beginning of our freshman year of college at Brigham Young University, when we were both freshmen in the dorms. And we started off as friends. And at some point, I decided that I liked him and nobody was asking me out. And everybody thought he was my boyfriend because we were hanging out all the time. And so basically, doesn't the story go that I kind of said, what's the deal? We either need to go out or stop hanging out so much?
Yeah. And I said, I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah. So we call this Black Tuesday.
It was a little awkward.
It was a little awkward. We call this Black Tuesday when I kind of challenged him to figure it out, right?
Right.
And you kind of said, I don't know. And I said, well, you've got 24 hours to figure it out, right?
And I came back and I said, yes, I'll go out with you.
It wasn't quite like that.
It was the 90s.
It wasn't like I was asking you out. I was just saying, hey, what's the deal? But you did send me a very nice card the next day that was in my little dorm mailbox. And that kind of said, we're going to work it out and everything will be great. And that night you said, I guess we should date. Because you weren't so eloquent.
I'm still not.
That's why we call it Black Tuesday. Well, you're going to be just great on the show, dear. I'm glad you're here. So And the other thing you should know about OJ, so that's when we met. We were married after he served a mission. He served a mission for 2 years in Argentina. And I finished up my degree while he was gone. And when he came home, we got married a few months later. And like you said, I was 20, going on almost 21, but 20. I was pretty young. I graduated young as well. And he was just off a mission and trying to get back into school and get his degree to move on to dental school and working part-time as a dental assistant. And we were married. And we kind of started having kids pretty quick. We had our first son within the next year.
Well, and it was interesting that we only dated for a month or two before I left.
Yeah.
And then we kind of got to know each other with letters.
Yeah,
for
that's
2
true.
years.
That's true.
Without actually being together. So that
which
might
was
have been a
kind of
thing.
good. I think it was good. Yeah. And we sent letters every week, or mostly every week, for 2 whole years. And we sent tapes. Right? So we'd record, that was back in the day of cassette tapes. So we had our little cassette tape recorder, and we could record a tape and say, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm doing. We'd send it back, and and sometimes we'd kind of devise questions to get to know each other better. What are your values and what do you think about this? And, so I think it really was a good way to get to know each other. So when he came home, it was kind of like, well, if the physical connection is still there, then I guess we're probably going to get married because.
And it was there.
It was there. Yeah, baby. No. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, a little bit more about OJ here. His real name is not Orenthal James, which...
No, Orlando Joaquin.
Orlando Joaquin. Okay, he always says that. It's Owen Jeffrey, just so everybody knows. But he likes to tease about that. And he's a really fun guy. He obviously went on to become a dentist. He works as a dentist. He was in graduate school while I was in graduate school. And we obviously have 6 children now, which, one of the most fabulous things I think about my husband was how he responded when we inherited my nephews, which you have to remember, these are my sister's 2 children. And when my sister died and when her husband died, we inherited her 2 children, and he didn't ever question it or say anything. He just accepted them as his own, and they've been adopted now for several years, and they're just our kids. So I think that's one of the best things about you, dear.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And he also is an avid golfer. So if any of you have read This Is How We Grow, there's a lot in there about me getting frustrated with him about golfing. So talk about conflict. That's one of our conflicts. He golfs a lot, but he's very good at it. So, and also he's really fun. I think OJ brings out the fun in me, and I try to bring out the serious, responsible, nurturing side in him, right?
Right.
Right. Okay. So it's good to be different and complement each other. All right. So let's just jump right in. I wanted to kind of start off by asking you, OJ, what do you think are some of the most common conflicts that most couples face? I shared a couple that, according to research, were common, but what do you think are some of the things that most couples face or that we've faced as far as conflict?
I mean, I've thought about it a lot lately because we've gotten to that point where now a lot of our friends have gotten divorced, and we're trying to figure out why, because they seemed just like us for 10 or 15 years. I think in some cases the people just grow apart. They have different likes and dislikes, and they don't go together in life. Other times I think it's just a matter of mood. Mm-hmm. You have mood swings. At least I do. Do you ever have mood swings, dear?
Okay, he's being kind right now because really he means I have mood swings and he doesn't.
But I think there's times when one partner in the relationship can help fix the other person's mood. But when both moods are down, then the conflicts gets worse, and people aren't as quick to forgive, and they're not as patient.
Yeah.
And I think that's when conflict starts to become where they're looking for a way out. Mm-hmm. So I think it's helpful to make sure you are as healthy as you can as an individual, so that you can keep your relationship healthy as well. That's a good
point. Wow, look at you. This isn't really your...
Wow, look at me.
No, I mean, this isn't his thing. This is my thing. And, I've invited him to speak with me a couple of times, and he's sort of like, why did you make me do this? And today he was kind of like, why did you make me do this? But good job, honey. I'm with you. You have to be healthy as an individual in order for the couple, the partnership, to be strong and healthy as well. Right?
Right.
Oh, he's winking at himself now. He thinks he's all that. So I'm with you on that. And I think there are a lot of things, like you said, that can cause conflict and problems in a marriage and make marriages break up. And like I was thinking as I was putting this together, making marriage work takes work. And I think that's part of the problem too, don't you? That sometimes we think that it should be this blissful thing, or it should feel as happy and wonderful as it did when you were first falling in love, or but it's not mostly like that.
Yeah, you like to compare your marriage to others, and it's hard to compare to TV marriages and the fun that they may have. But I think also what's important with conflict, kind of like a bank account, you don't address things when you're going bankrupt. If you see a trend, the best way to resolve conflict is to not get in too deep of a conflict.
Yeah, so, I think that's good. So you don't wait till you're bankrupt. You start before it gets to the end and try to work on it.
So you're never going to avoid conflict.
Right.
I think you're going to resolve conflict, and it's easier if it's a smaller conflict.
Right. So what are some of the most common things that that you think other couples and we argue about?
Well, you discussed it. A lot of couples argue about money. They argue about kids, how to raise the kids, how's the schedule, who gets more free time. And I think when someone's feeling down, they're looking for a reason why. And if they don't feel like they're validated, or if they don't feel like, they're a partner and having a partner in the relationship, then they feel like they're all on their own.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I'm with you. And I would add to those, just from my job, what I see a lot is communication, like just wanting to be understood or trying to understand each other can cause a lot of problems. They feel like he just doesn't get me or she just doesn't get me. I think that's another one. And then, of course, intimacy and sex is a biggie, as you kind of alluded to earlier. You didn't allude to it being a problem, but yeah, that's important. Okay, I'm not going to get
pun here, right?
Yeah. Okay, do not. Like I said, he's a funny guy, but we're not going to be too funny on this show. Okay. So these are all some of the issues. So the divorce rate is still over 50%, and for second marriages, it's over 60%. So really, most couples don't make it. And why do you think most couples don't make it in today's world? Like, what contributes to that? Obviously, conflict, not knowing how to resolve their issues, and their conflict is a big part of it. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, dear?
I mean, I think part of it is just that it's more of an option now. It's an option that's on the table, whereas 30, 40, or 50 years ago, maybe that wasn't an option. So no matter how bad a fight or a conflict got, the D word was never brought up. Whereas now, you even hear guys start talking about starter wives and things like that. Like, you go into it knowing it's like buying a house. You'd like to have it forever, but there's a good chance you won't. And that's okay. And so I think the fact that people are going into marriage knowing that it may not be a forever thing, then they always have that as a backup strategy when things get difficult, and they're going to get difficult.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think that's true. And I think that's pretty sad that that's the case. But I agree with you. I think that sometimes can make people not work as hard on the marriage, or not. They feel like if it gets hard, well, at least I have this out or this other option. I'm thinking of clients that I see who have, big, important, big things going on in their life, and they have valid concerns and valid conflicts, but they end up throwing around the D word a lot. Sort of like anytime they get in a fight, it's like, well, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to divorce you. And it kind of just, when that starts entering a relationship, that's the mindset, then you're not going to be able to make it work.
Right.
As soon as you start thinking that that's your possibility, and we're of course not sitting here saying that there aren't times when divorce is absolutely the way to go and what you need to do, but we're talking today about making marriage work, not about, having an out of divorce.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So some of these conflicts, one of the things that I was reading about when I was doing my research, I was coming across some research by John Gottman, which I love. And we're going to talk a little bit about him in my Simple Solutions segment at the end of the show. I'm going to be sharing one of my favorite resources for couples that can help you to make your marriage work. And as I was going through the research, I remember seeing, and I think I've told you about this, but I remember doing a course on Gottman couples therapy, and John Gottman is like the top researcher. He's been researching couples for over 20 years, and we've been married for 20 years, and seeing what makes marriage work versus what makes it fall apart. And one of the things that he found was, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, was that really what made the marriage work was that couples knew how to not only resolve the conflict. That was a biggie. That's one of the most important things. But also that we know how to build up the positive side of our relationship and not just focus on overcoming the negatives. So what are your thoughts on that whole concept, dear, of, either building up the positive side of our relationship in addition to overcoming the challenges. Because I think a lot of couples get stuck in they only work on the relationship when there's a problem. But I believe we have to work, and the research shows we have to work on it all the time and be building up the positives too. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's helpful that each individual has a passion. Mm-hmm. And if the passion can work, where both in the couple can work on that passion and not always do it together, but each have one, that will bring growth in the individual. And then from there, you hopefully have something that you enjoy with your partner, mm-hmm. whether it's traveling, whether it's date night or going to the movies or watching TV or eating ice cream, whatever it happens to be. There needs to be some connection. And I think the connections need to be probably every day, even if they're very small, mm-hmm. whether it's just a cute text or a note or whatever. But I think there needs to be some sort of connection in your love language often.
Love language. Nice, dear.
Gottman.
Yeah, actually, Gottman is not love languages, but the other stuff is. But the other stuff is Chapman is love languages. Sorry. But what have you learned about love languages, dear, over the course of our marriage?
Each person, if you've taught me right, has a way that they like to be loved.
Yeah.
And if I like gifts, then sometimes I'll love someone else by giving them gifts, mm-hmm. but that's not necessarily right unless that person feels love by gifts. Mm-hmm. So what you need to try to do is figure out how your partner likes to be loved, mm-hmm. and then love them in that way.
Very good.
Is that right?
That's right. Way to go. Yeah. And I think that you know a lot about that because we've really had to work on that in our marriage.
Yeah, we're different.
We're very different. So tell the people how we're different and we've tried to do to overcome that.
I'm a fun person. She's a little bit of a nerd.
I am admittedly a nerd because I like to study and read, and that's what I like to do.
And
I'm fun too, though. I can be fun.
You've got a lot of ambition, a lot of drive, and I used to. And I've gotten to the point where I'm happy now, and I just want to cruise. And you don't understand that.
Yeah. I don't get that. How can you be happy where you are? Why don't you just keep wanting to
I guess improve? I dreamed this far.
Okay. Well, then you need a new dream.
Why? Good.
Let's see. This is how we're different.
I know.
These are some of the ways we're different. We actually have very different interests. We don't really love to do a lot of the same things.
Right.
But how do we overcome that?
How do we overcome that?
Good question.
I don't know.
We do have some interests, obviously. A similar interest, obviously.
Right.
We must.
I think we actually have similar interests and disinterests. Like when I ask you, you want to go to the movies tonight and you want to go to dinner tonight, and neither of us really wants to.
But you feel like you have to ask me because that's what couples are supposed to do.
Yeah. And it's nice that we can both say, no, we're good.
Yeah. We can watch TV and have ice cream.
We can watch TV,
lock the door on the kids and do nothing because we're tired.
And that's okay.
Yeah. We both like the outdoors. I mean, there are things that we like to do. We like, we like similar things, but most of our hobbies are not the same. So, I mean, I'm sharing this because for all of you listening out there, and hopefully I'm going to interject here that hopefully you can either rewind or pause, or you've already done this, and go get your spouse or your partner, your husband or your partner, and have him come and listen too, because there's stuff here that he's going to learn as well. I should have said that earlier.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I don't think you need to have the same hobbies as your spouse. You don't have to love kayaking or walks on the beach. I think in our case, we both had a very strong value set
that's a biggie.
As kids, mm-hmm. and then as teenagers. And then when we met, I think we both had similar goals in life. In our case, maybe it was based on a religion, but also we just had a value system that was the same.
Yeah.
And that maybe is our connection. And with that, then we can find things that are maybe shallow on the surface to do together, but deeper in, we have that connection through our goals in life.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that. That's exactly what I was hoping to share with everybody, that's really what it's all about, is finding those deeper values and that connection that doesn't have to be something like surface or everyday. And you don't have, as you can hear from us, you don't have to have a ton in common to love somebody and to work on a marriage and to keep the marriage going. But I think a lot of people in today's world, they start to think, well, we've just grown apart. We don't like the same things. We don't do things together. Well, I understand that can happen for sure, but I would like to say, first though, try to have the same interest. Try to have find something to do in common to keep connected, because I think your advice, OJ, that you said about, it needs to be something small each day, just some little thing that you can do to connect with each other each day is how you can build that positive side of the relationship.
That's correct.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I learned from you. See, we learn from each other. That's the way it goes. Now, I remember when you came to speak with me a couple months ago, I was talking about women's emotional health for a group of women. And then I came back. They had me come back and speak to the women and their husbands because they wanted their husbands to know all about their emotional health and mental health. And so I brought my husband to talk about it from the men's point of view. And I remember one thing that you brought up that I was very impressed with. Again, you are listening sometimes when I talk about things. The emotional bank account.
Okay.
Yes. So tell me what you have learned over the years here about the emotional bank account, or what does that mean to you?
What it means to me is you need to make, like a regular bank account, enough deposits to offset the withdrawals.
Yes.
So if you are in the relationship and you take without ever giving, you're going to end up overdrawn.
Yeah.
And you're going to look across at the person and they're not going to look quite as cheery as you are, because they will have been stepped on, walked over, neglected, taken advantage of, all of those things.
Very good. Okay. And it's not like, okay, it sounds like I'm his teacher and I'm trying to correct him, but
I came up with most of this myself.
Yes, he came up with this himself. So this is something that we've worked on because I did learn about this. This is another Gottman principle that I learned about many years ago early on in our marriage that we tried to work on all these years, because we do know he's right. If we don't put the positives into the bank account, you can't make a withdrawal. So when we're talking about resolving conflict, it's really important to have a very positive, black bank account versus being in the red, where if you do one small thing when you're in the red on your account, then it's going to feel a lot bigger than if you've done all these great things and you have tons of credit in your account and then you do something, it's not going to matter as much.
So if I make a withdrawal from my account, is that a deposit into your account, or can both accounts be positive?
Well, I think they could both be positive, don't you?
That's the goal, right?
That's the goal.
Okay.
That's right. But you're right. That's a good point, though, because I think a lot of people might think, well, if I'm giving this to him, then I'm taking it from myself, and, kind of get into that.
Right.
We've been in that, too. We've had our times of really kind of almost competing about who's got it worse.
Right.
Who's more tired.
And it's not a time for time always. Some people will try that, and it never quite works out. But I think you can build up the other person without taking down from yourself.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about.
In fact, I believe that when you build up the other person, it builds yourself up too, because you're loving them better. Don't you think? Yeah. I think anything we do to love somebody else only makes us better.
Nice.
Yeah, right?
Next.
So, next. So we need to make sure that we create and keep a positive balance in our bank account. So what do you think husbands can specifically do to put some deposits into their wives' bank accounts? What are some things you've learned to do?
I mean, it depends. When we had younger kids, it was typically changing a diaper, letting mom get a nap, taking the kids away so you could get some rest or some work done, doing some shopping. I mean, some of those little things that are difficult for a younger mom or a mom with younger kids. And then later it might be something more significant of a date or a thought or a gift. An affirmation? Is that what it's called?
Sure. Yes.
When you validate somebody?
Validate. Yes, that's good. Women like to be validated. I particularly like that.
Some like gifts.
Yes.
Some like time.
So what do I like?
You like time.
Alone.
Right. That's your
time
love
to do my
language.
thing.
And affirmation.
Well, spending time, love language, is really for those who like to just be with the other person no matter what.
Okay.
That's not really us. We like to be with each other, but that's not our main love language. We both agree with that.
Right.
It's not like we have to be together all the time, right?
This is the guest room and kind of my room too.
Right. Because, okay, let's just say it. OJ sleeps up in this guest room much of the time. like 90%,
Except when we're in hotels.
95%. Except we're in hotels or we have guests because this is the guest
Right,
room, and then he'll
right.
come sleep downstairs. But a lot of people hear that and they think, oh my gosh, your marriage must be on the rocks. But it's not about that. It actually started when I was pregnant and he had just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and we just could not sleep in the same room. I'm a super light sleeper. He wakes up all the time with his diabetes. And at first I used to feel badly about it. I used to feel like, oh man, we're not sleeping in the same room, right? And I try to make you feel bad about it. Like, don't you think we need to be in here? We need to talk to each other in the morning. But we've soon learned that for us, our sleep is crucial. And when we get enough sleep, we're actually happier and kinder to each other versus waking each other up all night.
Yeah, so for the first few years, you're like, don't you think it's weird we sleep in separate rooms? In the last few years, we're both kind of like high five and go to our own rooms.
I know sometimes they'll be like, I can sleep in here tonight if you want. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Don't feel that you need to have a relationship like you see on TV.
Right.
I don't think
You
people
make it
wake
your own
up
way.
in satin sheets and roll over and
Cuddle.
kiss and cuddle. No, it's probably not like that. Assuming we have a happy marriage, it's not like that.
For us, it isn't, and it just looks different. So, and that's a good lesson that everybody's marriage is going to look different. And what you do to love each other and to put positive things into your bank account is going to be different based on what that person likes and wants.
Right.
Because I'm okay with being on my own, and my love language is actually acts of kindness or acts of service, doing nice things for me, and positive affirmations. Those are the words you were looking for.
That's what I was looking for.
What you meant by time was time alone,
Right.
or time to do my thing. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that. So basically what you're saying is, husbands, look for what your wife needs. Use that love language thing. Find out her love language. You can go find the book by Gary Chapman and identify her love language, and then love her in that way.
And don't keep a secret of how you want to be loved.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, I think in our marriage for a long time, you kept trying to get the other person to love you the way you wanted to be loved. Mm-hmm. When you wouldn't tell them. So then they had to guess.
Right.
And then you try different things and you get frustrated, and little did you know that's all it would take to make life happy again.
Was to what? Not to tell you what I want instead of
No,
guessing?
I think for a long time you didn't know my language, I didn't know your language, and neither of us got really what we wanted.
Right.
And, we'd go out or we'd do things that neither of us really cared about.
Right.
Right.
So that's really important. And that reminds me of a time, we're talking about conflict, but some of the issues in marriage that make a marriage difficult don't even have to be that we're fighting with each other. It can just be life stress or life conflict. And I'm thinking of the time that I wrote about in This Is How We Grow, after we had, had these 6 kids all of a sudden, and all this was going on. And then we found this time we were trying to adopt the kids, and we were trying to go to court, or not trying to go to court, but being taken to court by their grandparents, and this whole major stress. To me, that was like the most stressful time of our marriage. And yet I remember I was so emotional, and so I was grief stricken and emotional, and just, I was scared, and I hated that I was being taken to court, and that we were being, challenged as good parents, that we have to be evaluated to see if we're good parents, when I felt like we were trying to do the right thing by taking these kids in. And, I was a wreck. And so what I remember, and you can tell me what you think, dear, but is that, we did by then luckily know each other's love languages. And so luckily I was able to kind of say, okay, I know his love language is physical touch. That's the main one. And for me, mine is, verbal affirmations and acts of service. So, he could come home and he would come and sit and listen to me just talk and cry about whatever. And I know that you didn't love it. He does not like doing that. But he would do it. And then he would sometimes leave and go put the kids to bed and let me take a bath or something. And then I felt like I wanted to then give him the physical touch that he needs, right? So it improved our intimacy and sex life as well, because that was what you needed. And it turns out that's what I mean, we all need all these things, but that's kind of how the love languages can work and how we can build the emotional bank account when we understand that whole principle. Yeah?
Yeah, I was trying to think of other things, but it totally blew my mind. We started talking about sex and I totally spaced out.
Yeah, that about says it all right there, people. But one other thing you said, dear, that I want to point out, which I think is a great point for all of you listeners out there, for you couples, is the idea of mind reading. That you're right. That's one thing I had to learn. And I asked him, what can husbands do to contribute to the emotional bank account. And for the wives, one thing that we need to do is to not expect them to read our minds and to know what we want and to do what we want without asking. One thing I had to learn was if I want something from my marriage, from my relationship, I have to ask for it. And it's not always easy. I hear that all the time with women who they say, but he should know better.
No, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, I've learned that over the years. I used to feel like that too. Like, he should know better. And then I really got it. Like, he really had
when
no
you
clue.
Realized all the stuff that's going on in your mind, I've got nothing going on in there.
Yeah. I didn't understand. I did not believe
nothing.
you when you said that.
Nothing.
Yeah. So he said that and I was like, how is that possible?
Right.
But apparently it's possible.
Lucky me.
We're very different. Everybody can be very different, but you can still make it work. Okay, so that emotional bank account is really important. Now, let's talk about fighting fairly. Right. So when we actually have conflicts, and we've had our fair share, what are some of the ideas that you think might help the listeners out there to, as a couple, learn to fight fairly? Because again, that's really what it's all about. We're talking about making marriage work. We're talking about resolving this conflict and building the positive side and then overcoming the challenges. And so when the challenges come, how can we, quote unquote, fight fairly?
Well, I think that we all have words and phrases that are going to spark emotion in our partner. Mm-hmm. And when the emotions get high, sometimes we're holding that like a grenade that we're going to toss over there. And we know it's going to sting and dig. We shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what fighting fairly sort of means, is that bomb that you can throw and it's going to level the opposition. Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
I think also getting either loud or physical, obviously abusive is completely out of the question. Mm-hmm. But I mean, just when you're loud and things like that, then very few things that are productive are going to happen. Mm-hmm. So you try to be polite, and you can talk like this, even if you're saying, I hate your guts,
Right.
But if you can do it in a way and then listen to each other, and we've had times where it gets bad enough where you can just call a timeout. Mm-hmm. And just say, you know what, we both need to get away, think about it. The old thing of never going to bed angry at each other. You can if you sleep in separate rooms.
Yeah, good point. There you go.
But sometimes you just need a timeout.
Yeah.
And also learning how your partner fluctuates in these conflicts. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things are said that shouldn't be said, and then you have to apologize. So I think it's nice. In my case, I try not to ever say anything I need to apologize for.
Yeah. And I apologize a lot.
Yeah, sometimes you're better at apologizing.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. I am the one that always comes and says, I don't like fighting. And pretty much, I mean, you have to say that's one of my strengths is after we have an argument, I usually am the one that comes up and pretty soon after to say, I'm sorry, I don't want to go to bed angry, or I don't want to, stay angry at each other. Or like, I didn't mean that.
Yeah, and I would say one of the hardest things is you've both gotten over something and it's hard to kind of come back and make amends.
Yeah.
And I've just said to others before, like, just be polite. And then neither of you wants to stay in that fight. And sometimes the emotions are just raw where it's hard to go back to that lovey-dovey stage.
Yeah.
But sometimes just being polite, and then you get a few minutes or hours or days into it and things can return to normal.
Yeah.
Sometimes a note is good. Mm-hmm. If you don't know how to use your words right.
Like use your words. If you don't know how to, like you. Well, yeah. Also, the good thing about writing down what you're feeling and what you want to tell your partner is it takes the emotion out.
Right.
So there's no chance to just get sidetracked on an issue or to feel whatever. So you can actually take time to formulate what you want to say without being interrupted or
text.
Text can be very helpful too. I mean, any form of communication is helpful.
Maybe keep it off Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah,
at first.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Don't publicize your arguments. Yeah, although I think I have had some times where I'm just like, I'm going crazy. My husband's driving me crazy today. But it's not like I'm actually mad at you or telling him about a fight. I think I've done that once. I just needed to vent. But yeah, I'm with you. Do not do that.
I wasn't on Facebook back then.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't on Facebook yet. So, but no, we should not slander or put anything out there that we're going to regret later. And I think your rule is really a good one, OJ. And he really is good at this, about trying to keep it polite when he's more like, he'll be more quiet in the argument, whereas I can get really worked up and have a lot of words to say. He doesn't know what to say, and I have a lot of things to say. And then I get frustrated at him, like, why aren't you saying anything? And he's like, in my mind, I'm saying yes, and I'm nodding, and I'm like, you're not giving me any verbal, signal that you even are hearing me. But, it's important for us to, like you said, some of the points that you made that really stand out to me is, one, to take a time out. And that is actually a tool that I use in therapy all the time and teach people that you should take a time out when it starts to get to that point where you're arguing so much, or it's just going nowhere, or you're both just, it goes in circles. Or even if you're just too emotionally worked up, your body is worked up, you're not going to get anything positive out of it. So that taking a time out is helpful. And usually what I teach is that you should take a time out for at least an hour. Because it takes that long for your body to calm down totally after being all worked up. So it's really helpful to go do something positive. Like if you can exercise or take a walk or do something to kind of get your mind on other things or do something relaxing, that can be really helpful. But then the trick is to know that you're going to come back eventually and finish it.
And be productive.
Yeah. And that's where I do always say that, I don't believe that it's a good idea to never go to bed angry. I think that if you can do that, then great. But I think that a lot of times people think that's the way it has to be. So they stay up super late and they keep spinning and fighting about things, and they're just too tired. And sometimes all you need is a good night's sleep, and then you wake up and go, oh, wait a minute, I don't even care about that anymore. Right?
Right. And I think sometimes too, we've had arguments when the argument has gone on long enough that what we're arguing about, we're not clear on.
Yeah.
So I have to say, are we arguing about this? And then you might say, no, that's not the problem at all.
Yeah.
It's this. And I'm, oh, that's easy. I'm on board.
I'm with you on that one.
So sometimes just sit back and make sure that what you're fighting about is really what you're fighting about.
That's good advice. I'm with you on that. I think that's a good one. I also think that it's, like OJ said, to be polite and to try not to say things you're going to regret or do things you're going to regret. I mean, in Gottman's research, this 20 years of research on couples, the worst thing possible for a relationship is contempt. I mean, there's he calls them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. They're the four things that actually are not good for a relationship, which are defensiveness. And some of us are going to be more in one of these camps than another. Like you're more of a defensiveness. Criticism, I'm more in that camp. Stonewalling, which is kind of like putting up your wall and not wanting to talk about it. Men tend to fall more into that. And then contempt. But contempt is more like OJ said, knowing their hot button and having the grenade ready to throw, and you just throw it. And contempt is the worst of all. So if we get into that contempt with each other, it's a lot harder to dig out and to love each other again when you throw those bombs, because they blow up a whole bunch of the bank account right there.
Yeah, and I think when there's that contempt, you end up with one person in the relationship that has to be somewhat submissive to that. Because if they both throw contempt back and forth, then it just spirals out of control.
Yeah, then it's
what happens is you end up with someone that's maybe verbally abusive to the other person, and then the other person that just has to take it. And then you end up with an unequal partnership.
Right. Unhealthy and unequal and just not good all around. Absolutely. I'm with you. And, another one of our rules that we have is no discussing tough things after 10 p.m., basically.
Yeah.
Right. Because we go to bed early. We're tired. He's like falling asleep around 8 and trying to. But we really do have a rule, like do not talk about tough things after a certain time period. And you can set up these rules with your spouse or partner. And what I suggest is just when you're not arguing, set up your rules for arguing. So we're talking about fighting fairly and resolving conflict well. You have to kind of know the ground rules and follow them. You have to know we're not going to bring up past issues. We're not going to, throw bombs at each other. And if one of us starts to feel like we're getting too worked up, we can take a time out, and this is how it's going to work. And this is what's going to happen. And we've been doing this for so long. We just kind of know what's going to happen. And, we have this code word, even tippy toe, that we use for lots of things. Like it can mean like tippy toe is like the ultimate. Like,
don't try to see through my words. What I'm saying is the truth.
Yeah. Tippy toe, I mean
I'm saying this, I mean it, and you can take it to the bank. Like, I'll pick up the kids' tippy toe.
Right.
Versus, no, I'll do it. No, I'll do it,
Right. Right. Or also, like, I am at a cliff right now, tippy toe, cannot talk anymore. Okay, got it. We need a break. Let's go take a time out. Let's go to bed. Let's whatever we're going to do and talk about another time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And tippy toe, and he likes that because then he's like, oh, sweet, maybe she'll forget about it or be happier tomorrow. But tippy toe is something from Seinfeld. You know, that was their keyword, right? So you can have your own keyword too. So these are just some things you can do to set up kind of negotiation skills and rules for arguing and conflict resolution for yourselves. All right, so let's kind of wrap up here with our last topic being how can people prevent conflict in marriage? There are a lot of ideas in this. You know, we talked about there's so many things you might have conflict about. It might involve your kids. It might involve the finances. It might involve your work or your career or your goals or your hobbies. It might involve something like chores or sex or communication. So OJ, what are your thoughts on some of the ways that couples could prevent conflict?
I mean, I look at a lot of families that have conflict, and you can feel really bad for the people that have issues where cancer or illness or something affects the family because they have no control over that.
Yeah.
But the ones where they have control, financial problems or fidelity problems, a lot of these problems that are something that they can control, I think a marriage is bad enough when the outside world is putting stress and pressure on you.
Yeah.
Or just the challenges of life. But when you are your own worst enemy at the same time, that makes it really hard. So the things that you can be in charge of and take control over, you need to do your best at keeping those smooth sailing.
I'm with you. That's a good point. So the things that you do have control over, because we know we don't always have control in life. I mean, really have control over very little. As an example,
we started off making very, very, very little money and having no money.
Yeah.
But we've always been fairly frugal in the sense that we've never been super stressed or strapped about money.
But we make it a priority to save and to be careful.
Right. We spend less than we make. And and if you do that, then you take that stressor out. Not that it's never a stress, but it's not something that we're going to fight about typically.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
What else?
Well, you're talking about the things we have control in life versus the things we don't. And, you and I have been through a lot of times where there's things we couldn't control.
Right.
We've had a lot of major stress, a lot of death, a lot of loss, a lot of really intense experiences that life just hands you. And I think that those things can really make or break a couple, Yeah,
and I will say, to the men that sometimes all you need to do is shut your mouth, nod your head, and maybe tap her on the back as she's talking.
Yeah, like you don't always have to give advice.
They just want to vent. You don't need to fix everything. They just want to talk it out or cry it out. And you'll do yourself a lot of good by not trying to fix or say anything.
Unless she's waiting for you to say.
And that's an easy one. Like I said, you can do that.
Yeah.
You can sit there and not do anything.
That's true. And that's a good way to prevent future conflict, because you could end up fighting about something when you're trying to tell her what to do and she's like, I just want you to listen.
All they wanted to do was vent.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good advice.
But again, not letting the conflicts grow so big.
Yeah.
That it's now a major issue that needs serious help.
Yeah, I'm with you. And when it comes to kids, how can we prevent conflict with our discussions about children? I mean, for one, I think you mentioned earlier, it's really important that we have the same values. And in order for us to parent our children, we kind of have to be on the same page, because I think one of the biggest things that I know you're big on this, and we both kind of are, is we need to have each other's back as parents. We can't be letting the kids interplay between us and pit us against each other. That can cause a lot of problems right there. So we need to be on each other's side first.
Right. So our core values, if we pass those along to the kids and they know that those are the rules, those are the values, then they kind of know where the boundaries are. And with 6 kids, we have everything you can think of. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make it easier, but at least we're on the same page, so we would know how to know when a line's been crossed and maybe talk about how we're going to fix it.
Right. And the kids know that they try to get us against each other. But, even sometimes, and I know OJ's been better at this than I have, because there have been times where I don't agree with what he's doing with the kids. And I want to say, no, you need to blah, 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 listen to them, or da, 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 like tell him how to parent. Right. And I've made that mistake before. I've made that mistake where I've said, I said that in front of the kids. You know, I've said to them, you know, in front of the kids, I've said to OJ, like, no, you need to blah, blah, blah. And then the kids throw it back later, like, well, yeah, Dad, because even Mom said blah, blah. And I end up causing conflict by not just taking a side. So what's better is to take each other's side in the meantime and, you know, then to go talk about it in private.
Yeah. And I think if you're around your kids, to criticize your partner, like seriously criticize in front of them.
Yeah.
That can be really, really damaging.
Contempt in front of your kids is bad.
Contempt in front of the kids is bad. It's one thing to be goofing around.
Yeah.
Like where Sydney will say, is Dad going to work or is Dad going to golf?
Yeah. Yeah, we always joke about that because we never know if he's going golfing or working.
Because when my daughters say something to me, I know where they got that from.
Hey, they know you're gone all the time golfing or working. You do
general.
work hard too. I'm not going to dispute that. But that brings me to another point, though, that another part I think that can help us to prevent conflict is to find a way to support each other.
Yeah.
In not only our work and our roles in the home, our roles in the home, our work outside of the home, and also our hobbies and interests, right?
Yeah, and I think it's nice. In our case, we always like to have something kind of to look forward to.
Yeah.
I know individually, if there's some kind of carrot out there, whether it's a trip or a thing that we're going to do either together or individually, that kind of helps get through things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one thing that you and I had to learn to do is how do you support each other when you feel like one person, I know I joke about it, but I always call golf the mistress in our relationship, that, you know, golf is sort of the thing that we do argue a lot about golf in the summer when he's gone golfing a lot, but it's changed and evolved over the years, because it used to be that my beef was kind of like, well, I'm home with the kids all the time and they're little and I'm tired and I need a break and you're gone all day. So we used to do time for time. You know, we used to do that where he'd get home and then I'd say, okay, now you were gone this amount of time. That's what I get now. You go do whatever with the kids. I get to do whatever I want. You know, now we don't do that anymore, but we just try to encourage each other when our chances come. Like if he's going out of town this weekend for a golf tournament and I, you know, go out of town to speak or to go, you know, do what I like to do or just to even have time alone sometimes. And he encourages me to do that.
Your idea of fun is going to speak. That's what I mean by you're a nerd.
I know. I go to speak or I go to ride or I go to be alone because that's what I like to do. But yeah, I am a nerd. But, you know, you have to try to support each other in that time and in those things that really light you up. My radio show, my episode that we're going to be listening to next week is on how to stop getting frustrated and yelling at your kids. And one of the things we talk about on that episode is about how important it is to do the things that light us up. And that's the one thing that's changed my feelings about golf with my husband, is that I've been out there with him and I see he's really good at it and he wins these tournaments and he has a lot of friends and he has a big social connection out there and it lights him up. And when he doesn't golf, he's like down and gloomy and eating too much chocolate.
Yeah, low.
his personal emotional bank account is low. So we need to support each other in helping, you know. And look at him on my radio show today. He did not want to do this, but he's doing a great job here, and is supporting me in what I like to do to help me light myself up. And I think that's really important too. And then the other one that I wanted to kind of wrap up on is communication, which to me is kind of like the core of a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Now you're kind of giving me a funny look.
It's like the psychobabble kind of thing. Of course, it's communication.
Well, okay. What have you learned about communication in our 20 years?
That the face of somebody can say a lot of things, but mainly the mouth part.
Okay, that's Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live.
I know. Well, the communication.
Yes, the mouth part.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what we've been talking about, that you do it in a way that you're actually getting your message across without being aggressive, without having contempt. And that's if you're in a conflict situation. But other times, it doesn't hurt to say something nice. It doesn't hurt to love and kind of woo the other person or flirt with the other person.
Yeah. In fact, another thing from Gottman is that he talks about thinking fondly of each other. And I remember in graduate school, we were both so busy. We had 2 little kids and it was just a crazy time. But I remember actively trying to think positively about him because, you know, it doesn't always, you don't always feel that like love and, oh, I just love my husband. You know, it's not like you wake up and feel that all the time. You're busy.
Really?
Okay, you don't.
20
you do?
years?
Okay, yeah.
I'm
yeah, no. But sometimes you have to like provoke it, right? So when you think about it, like you said, you send a little thoughtful text, I'm thinking of you, or you just think about a memory that you like about them or something that makes you think fondly about them. That can get you in that mindset of, you know, preventing any conflict because you'll actually like each other better.
Right. Or you send that little text, thinking of you, love you, winky face, whatever it is.
Cha-cha dancer, winky face. That's what he sends. Like, that means, hey, I'm coming home. Cha-cha dancer, winky face. Well, then I know what he's talking about. Yeah, those emojis can be very useful. You don't even have to use words sometimes, right?
But if you can get the other person to smile about you when you're not in the room, that can be good.
And again, this is all going back to like putting all that positive into the emotional bank account. And you're right. Pretty much everything we've been talking about today is about positive communication, whether it be communication in how you're acting towards somebody, what you're saying toward them, how you're building them up positively, how you're handling a conflict. You know, it's really important for us to actively work on how to better understand each other and to talk and to have a relationship and, you know, to continue to get to know each other. Even though it's been 20 years, I still every once in a while find out something I didn't know about you, you know? And that's fun. I like that. I love those conversations when we can just be talking about something and we're engaged and we're both on the same page. And, you know, sometimes that's one of the blessings of conflict in your life too, that comes from an outside source, is it can kind of almost unite you. You know, in some of our major conflicts that were life stress driven, it almost united us with each other against what was going on. You know, it kind of brought us together. So bottom line is, from my point of view, and then you can share your bottom line. Bottom line is that marriage isn't easy. And we have not, I mean, we're having fun today. We're having a good day here. We're in a good time right now, but we've had a lot of hard times. And there have been times where you start to wonder, like, this is the person I'm married to, and this is the person I am in this relationship. And you know, but that's a signal if we take it to say, hey, it's a wake-up call. It's time to do more work. And that marriage does require work. Making marriage work requires work. And resolving the conflicts positively, building the positive relationship, as well as overcoming the negative, it's not only possible, but it will happen if you make it a focus of your marriage.
Yeah, and if you want it to last forever, you can never give up.
Very good.
And you can't let giving up be an option.
Don't let it be an option. I'm with you. Thank you, dear. That's wonderful. Now, just before I completely wrap up for my Simple Solutions segment, I just wanted to share my 2 favorite books for strengthening marriage. And you've had a lot of hints during the show. One of them is by John Gottman, which is the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And I love it because he really focuses on the positives. He talks about a love map, understanding the other person and learning more about them and knowing them. He talks about these things like we were talking about, like how can you put more into the emotional bank account? How can you, think fondly of each other, and also how to avoid conflict and some of those things that we talked about as well. So that's one suggestion I have for any of you out there looking for more resources on this, as well as Gary Chapman's Love Languages book. They also have one for love languages in your children, so you can learn how to understand your children better. But as you could hear us talking today, that has been incredibly helpful in our relationship as well, is understanding each other's love language. It can make or break any kind of relationship. So you can go check out those books as well. And also, you can check out my book, This Is How We Grow, which has some fabulous stories in it about OJ and myself and kind of our struggles. And it shows just the reality that life isn't easy. And, you know, you have your main challenges. And just to kind of end, I want to share one of the favorite stories that everybody shares, honey, is this story in the book. And you'll have to see it for yourself. But I had this really rough day. And I shared this in a speech once, and I'm telling you, everybody in the room was crying. So you guys can see what a great husband I have here. I was having this really rough day during that time I was talking about, where I was feeling like really down on myself and really stressed and struggling a lot. And I was in the bath And I was just, my husband came home and he came in there and he asked me, kind of what was going on. And I just started bawling. And I don't know that I've ever had such a release of emotion all at once. And I don't even remember what I said or what I was talking about. I just know that I was so embarrassed because I was sobbing and I had snot coming out of my nose and I was literally naked in the bathtub, figuratively feeling naked and very exposed. And I rolled over and I was sitting in the tub and just laying there for 45 minutes sobbing. And at some point I heard him, move and leave. And I just thought, well, why would he want to be in here with me? Look at me. I'm a mess. This is just hideous. And when I finally stopped, the water actually got cold. It had been that long. When I finally rolled over and sat up, I saw that he actually hadn't left, that he was laying on the cold floor, just laying there by my side, even though I didn't even know it. And he stood up and he grabbed a towel and he just held it open and he wrapped it around me and he carried me to my bed like a baby. And he just tucked me in and gave me a kiss and turned off the lights and I went to sleep, and that was that. So I guess that's just a beautiful image to leave you all with, to show that's what we need to do for each other. We just need to love each other. And if there's anything that I would suggest for all you moms out there and all you couples is just choose to love and to love greatly, instead of choosing to stay stuck in a conflict. Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Would you rather be right or would you rather have love? And that'll wrap us up. So thanks again, honey, for being here.
Happy 20 years.
Happy 20 years. You can visit my website at drchristinahibbert.com, where I'm going to have a blog post with 20 of our tips for 20 years of marriage to help make marriage work. And he's trying to wrap me up here because he's like, it's been an hour, we're done. So check that out on the website, as well as we also have one on 17 years of marriage, our 17 tips to make marriage work. So check those out on the blog site. I'll also have a link to those things. And I hope you'll continue to join us here on Motherhood Radio each week, and visit my website at drchristinahibbert.com for more information on this and other topics. And until next time, I hope you will choose to grow through motherhood instead of going through it, because it's a lot more fun to grow through it together. And that's what we do each week here on Motherhood Radio. Bye-bye, everybody.